Hello and welcome again to the Next Gen Warrior Show. As always, I am your host, Dan Hamilton. The Next Gen Warrior Show is brought to you by Chairman George P. Bush and the Veterans Land Board. Today here at the Stephen F. Austin, I have the great opportunity of sitting down with Cassaundra, Melgar-C'De Baca. Cassaundra, we have spoken before over the last several months about Echelon Front. We've talked about your military history and as well as the growth, professional growth after service. Tell the audience before we get started about your military service and what you have grown in professionally after leaving the military.
Sure, great, and I appreciate you being willing to share these stories, Dan, in the Commissioner's Office for really highlighting what's happening in Texas. We're super lucky to live in a state that's so helpful to veterans. So I am an Army brat, actually. So I tell people my first 18 years.
Baptized into the military.
Yes, I was. So the Air Force was kind of like going to Girl Scout camp. It is anyway, we all make the joke, but it really was after being raised in the Army. But I spent 12 years as a crypto tech and then as a command and control enlisted person in the Air Force. Loved the experience. Didn't travel the world like I did as an Army brat.
Did you say that you enlisted again, or did you go the officer side, or what was your approach?
I was enlisted. I enlisted soon out of high school. My father is always going to be like number one hero to me. Yeah. I just think he's an amazing man. I get emotional even just talking about. He's just a good guy, you know. Mm-hmm. So I grew up looking at that, and just how he was as he developed as a leader, and I loved that. I wanted to be a part of whatever that was that had made this boy become this man that I grew up under. And then the people we were around, all the military families and the diversity, and we grew up around the world. We saw things. We developed relationships very quickly because we moved all the time. And I loved that. I wanted to continue that in my life. I went into the Air Force not by any other choice of Army. You didn't see in the 70s and 80s, you didn't really see a lot of women other than at maybe the medical clinics in the Army.
Nurses maybe.
But I saw them in the Air Force, so I thought, well, maybe I will go in the Air Force. And I had a great opportunity. I got to do the job my father actually did in the Army. Wow. So I felt like that was...
So you were following in his footsteps, literally.
He had no sons, so we were the ones his daughters
to carry on that memory, definitely.
So I went in active duty, and I spent 12 years. I was active duty, and then I was also in the Guard in the state of Washington, and then I got out in the Guard in the state of Texas, which made me think, well, okay, what do I want to do now? And I'll tell you real quick, when I first got out of active duty, it was pre-9/11, so we didn't have all the wonderful things we have for transition now.
The benefits and the structure
so many
and
great
the support,
things now.
Education benefits,
You were pretty much on your own. You out-processed and you were
they kicked you off the base and they said, okay, thanks for your service, good luck.
Have a nice day. So I got my first civilian job up in the Seattle area. And I walked into this huge warehouse, and they had all these manufacturing things going on. And mind you, I came out of the command post. So they walked me through, and I thought, I'm going to be leading these people, or I'm going to be training, implementing things. And they walked me through, and I saw this huge, like, Olympic-sized swimming pool of grease. And you saw this big truck bringing these potatoes in, and went through this peeling and slicing process. They would go down this conveyor belt, and they fell into the grease. And my job was to pick the burnt potato chips out off of the assembly line.
It's very exciting.
So I went from answering literally the red phone in the command post to picking. I lasted in that job about 15 minutes because I thought,
I can't do this.
Something is wrong. What did I do wrong? Like, I've done so much.
How long did it take for you when you left the service to get this job?
To get that, that job?
How long were you hired? Or how long after you left the military were you hired?
A year it took me. It was a long time.
What was your expectations going in? Was that you were going to lead these people and you were going to develop talent and you were going to have a meaningful job, and here you are picking the burnt potatoes.
Picking out the burnt potato chips.
The lesson you learned from that was what?
The lesson I learned from that was to be prepared. And one of the best things my father made sure, back in when I was active duty, you signed up for the Montgomery GI Bill. And he told me, sign up. It's $100 a month. Sign up for 12 months. You'll thank me someday.
You reap the benefits at the end.
So at that point, I realized I'm going to pick out burnt potato chips for the rest of my life, regardless of what great things I got to do in the military. or I'm going to use this benefit, because that's the only benefit we had at that time. So I used my Montgomery GI Bill to go to school. It actually took me quite a few. Honestly, I registered for school 9 semesters before I actually walked in my first classroom.
Interesting.
Because I was so freaked out. I would just get sick in the parking lot.
You were freaked out of
I was just
classroom
scared.
environment, of the social settings.
It was everything. And I was older.
Were you good at school when you were in high school?
I wasn't great in school at high school. I was just an average student.
Right.
It wasn't good or bad. But it was so unknown. They were kids.
I actually had a similar experience, if you don't mind me interrupting real quick. And we had, the first episode that we ever did with this was Jeremiah Gunderson. He's the Director of Student Veteran Services at the University of Texas. You may be familiar with him. Huge impact on my life, because I think so many veterans who go to a college campus have that culture shock. And that's essentially what you were experiencing, right? Sitting in your car, I can remember having, my heart was pounding, my armpits and my hands were sweaty. And it's kind of such a humbling thing, because you did things that were so much more difficult in the military, but yet this seemed to be like such a huge personal hurdle. And that sounds like what you were facing as well.
Oh yeah, it was much scarier than anything I experienced in the military. But I finally got past it and walked in a classroom. So I was fortunate that I had the benefits to go get my education, and that's when I came to Texas. I finished my education, and I got lucky. I'm going to say very honestly, I got lucky. I got into an ad agency. I'd always wanted to be in advertising. It had nothing to do with my military career, which is what I try to help people do now, is what you did in the military doesn't dictate what you do in the civilian world. You get to choose. So I went into advertising, but the funny thing is I couldn't break right into advertising. It was so different than the military. I mean, if you think about what an ad agency looks like.
It's
but
not very regimented. And
not regimented. I mean,
more
people,
creative,
they're wearing shorts and flip-flops walking around.
Yeah.
But I had a recruiter tell me, take your MBA and take your military off your resume, because I just finished my first MBA, which I thought, man, that's everything. That's all I have. That's my entire identity.
It's your identity,
is the military and my education now. But I did, and the next day I got a job offer at an ad agency. And my hiring manager told me, don't tell anybody that you were in the military.
And this was a veteran who told you this, or is this someone just in the office that you had been hired?
This was just somebody in the office. But this is pre-9/11 still. This is 1998. So there wasn't necessarily the conversation and the support for veterans. And it's a creative field. They didn't have a lot of veterans in that industry. And I thought, well, honestly, the first thing I thought is, I was in the Air Force, not the military. I mean, I wore blues to work every day. I wasn't in combat or anything. But I did that. I was still in the Guard. I didn't tell anybody that I was still in the Guard. And about 4 months into the job, while I was still, it was about 3 months. It was under my 90-day review. The Texas Air National Guard told me I was going to have to go to Shepherd for cross training, into wing training. And I was coming up on my 90-day review, so I felt like I needed to tell my boss, I'm going to have to go for 6 weeks.
And you had not told your boss at this point that you were in the reserve still?
I told her that I was in the Guard, but I made sure she knew it's a weekend. I drive to Fort Worth because I was in Dallas. It's not ever going to interfere. And that's when they told me I was going to have to go to school for 6 weeks. So I went to her and I said, hey, I need help. What do I do? I'm going to have my 90-day review, but I want to be honest with you. 6 weeks. I didn't know about all the protection laws and stuff like that. So she gave me a choice. You got this great career at one of the top ad agencies in the world, or you can go play soldier, is what she put it. And
that made your decision?
So I got out of the Guard at that point. That was at 12 years.
How has advertising, not only your career itself, but just the industry and the people that you've met through it, how has it influenced what you do today currently at EF Legion? Yeah,
definitely. So the great thing, because I made the decision and then I just went forward with that, didn't look back. The great thing about what I got in advertising is I was in on the bottom floor. I literally was picking up golf clubs for clients and shuttling a kid to daycare.
It's like being an E3 again.
Oh yeah, ground floor, but I was okay with that.
Why?
Because I knew that I had a goal. And I just always remember my dad. My dad was a command sergeant major, and he ran PT with his guys. Like, I always saw, and he would always tell me.
You have to earn your stripes,
Yeah,
right?
I would say, why are you doing that, Dad? You don't have to do that. And he said, I'm never going to ask somebody to do something that they haven't seen me do. Because then when I ask them to do something, they've already seen me perform. So you have to I just always kept that with me. And, the first day of basic training, you're starting ground zero.
Yeah.
You're the bottom of the barrel. So
Do you think veterans understand that perspective? Because
I think
don't know
harder.
If I did.
I think it's harder. I was just lucky. My dad was such a great first platoon leader for me at 6. And I had some good leaders in the Air Force that kept up that with me. I think it's harder. We had it harder pre 9/11 because we didn't have the support, but sometimes with too much support, post 9/11, which is great, I think veterans don't always realize you still have to start at ground zero. It's just like I tell people all the time, especially senior leaders. I'll tell a colonel, you wouldn't go hire a director from Dell to come be your next company commander, would you? No. And they instantly say, no, absolutely not. Well, then you can't expect Dell to come in and hire you at that level. You still have to learn the industry. You have a lot of soft skills, leadership, loyalty, dedication, adaptability. You learn very quickly, but you need to learn the industry. So I think advertising helped me do that because I got to speak to everybody from Frito-Lay to Toyota, and we talked about branding. So we changed brands.
Branding is everything.
I was lucky. We actually changed the Pizza Hut brand, put it on the Space Shuttle. That was many years ago.
Tell us about this
that
real
was
quick before
about 1999 we finished that.
What
from
Space
the old
Shuttle
logo.
was this on?
Yes, it was on the Space Shuttle in the summer of 99.
Isn't it interesting how veteran experience, military experience can be 180 degrees, otherworldly in this instance from what you were doing in the service.
Yes.
But you have to be willing to do that, and you were willing to do that. You had a conscious change from when you were going to go drill to say, okay, I'm going to stick with advertising. Then you are picking up golf clubs, you're doing whatever it takes at the ground floor. Then you put the Pizza Hut logo on the Space Shuttle.
Yeah.
In the middle of that, were you thinking, hey, I'm glad I'm doing this, I have any regrets about it, this is totally unexpected? What was kind of your thought process at that point?
Most of the time, I didn't like it. It was hard, it was difficult, it was unknown, but I kept my eye on the end zone, and I liked that. I liked that when I would look up, I had progressed. So the day-to-day, and I encourage people in that everywhere today, is you don't have to like today. Just like you didn't always nobody liked the gas chamber, but looking back, do we all not joke about
the gas chamber?
That day?
It's not coming out of your nose and you're crying.
So as long as you keep your eye on the end, you don't have to like today. You just have to know that today serves a purpose. You just have to get first downs. You don't have to, do the Hail Marys and get the touchdown. Just get a first down. That's all you have to keep doing. And advertising helped me with that because I worked on a lot of different projects, a lot of different clients. But what it also opened up for me was there's a lot of people doing bigger things than me. So at that point, I finished my second MBA, and I decided that I wanted to
And your two MBAs are in what?
International Business and Marketing.
Okay.
Yes. So I decided I don't want to be just the reaction person. I don't want to be just the platoon leader. I want to be the commander. So
macro perspective on business or
I want to
on
go
a company.
to the bigger side. So I did a lot of personal education and development to get there. I got mentors. Smartest thing I ever learned, again, from my father, was finding a mentor. I called people that were his commanders when he was a young person growing up in the military, and asked them for advice because they'd been out of the military for 10 years. I didn't look...
And asked their advice on what their transition was like, or specific things that had happened to you? How long were these conversations?
How to get in their seat.
Okay.
So I looked for people who didn't look like me, sound like me, they weren't in my position. I know as a female veteran, I mentor a lot of female veterans, but most of my mentors are not female veterans. They are either women in the corporate space or they're male veterans who have transitioned, because I already know what I'm going to tell myself when I look in the mirror. I look for people who are going to tell me other things, get other perspectives.
Yes, external perspective.
Yes, growing up in the military, I got that a lot, and in advertising, because we worked with so many different industries, I got that a lot. And veterans have that, they just don't realize they have that. That's a unique perspective that most people don't get. They grow up in one town, they may go away for college, but they have their set group of people their entire life. Well, veterans don't have that. They go to basic, you meet people from all over the world.
All over the country.
You get stationed in random places. You learn so much more than you think you do when it comes to interacting with people, customer service skills, leadership skills. We just don't realize that those are things that we take it for granted. Well, of course we know how to interact with somebody who doesn't look or sound like us. But most people in the private sector don't have that experience, and that's huge.
So, transition here for a minute. Obviously, advertising was not only something that you enjoyed, it's something you learned a lot from. And I think those two things are really important. If you're doing something that you don't enjoy, maybe consider doing something else. But you found something you enjoyed, you took the lessons you learned from it, you kept focus on the long-term trajectory. So now you're applying some of those principles and some of those lessons learned into EF Legion. Tell me who EF Legion is who it is for, and why you are providing the services.
Absolutely. Super happy to talk about that. I could talk about that all day long. So about 2 years ago, I met a man named Mike Sorelli. He is a Navy SEAL. He was getting into the veteran nonprofit space. I'd been in it for about 10 years, helping and supporting veterans from a nonprofit aspect. He was developing a really great program. We spent a lot of time together. I helped him work on that program for about 1.5 years. And then he gave me some exposure to some other things that he was working on. So his business partners are Leif Babin and Jocko Willnick. I'm sure most people know who those famous Navy SEALs are. They're not just Navy SEALs, though. They've actually written a couple of New York Times best-selling books. Discipline and leadership. The Dichotomy of Leadership is one of the more famous ones. And I've always believed in that, leadership from a different perspective because of my background, essentially. So when they told me, I was always a little bit jealous because I obviously wasn't a Navy SEAL. I wanted to be a combat comptroller. In my day, women could not be combat comptrollers. So I thought, man, they have all these great resources, these Navy SEALs. They get all this extra leadership training, and they get access to corporate conversations that I spent 20 years building, and I have a lot of those relationships, but they just have those relationships because they're Navy SEALs. How fortunate are they to do that? Because there's a lot of us out here that don't have that could keep up with those guys every day. And then Mike said, Jocko knows he has a name, he knows he has a platform. He wants to not do that just for Navy SEALs. He knows there are thousands of high-speed veterans who might have been in finance, who might have been a combat medic, they might have been a lot of other jobs, but they're just as high speed, they're just as smart, they're just as hardworking as a Navy SEAL is. Let's develop a program that trains them and prepares them in their transition to get into those jobs in the best corporations in the world. And then once we get them in there, let's stay for a year. Let's see what happens if we continue to massage their career, continue to mentor them. Because the reality is a lot of veterans can transition into a job, but within 12 months, less than 10% have,
So can you tell me the importance of following up with their careers, or why are veterans washing out of their careers and you guys are continuing to follow up them to prevent them from leaving the first year they've been placed, right?
Sure. So one of the reasons they wash out of their career is they got the wrong career. They did X in the military, so they feel like they need to do X in the civilian world. And it's not necessarily true. That's not what they're...
It's not apples to apples.
Yeah, it's absolutely not. And then they just don't understand the language. When I was in advertising, my first 6 months was challenging because I didn't understand the water cooler talk. I didn't understand,
past relationships with
go to
people,
happy
where
hour,
they've come
how
from.
do you build all that? I was very structured. I do my job, I'm better than everybody else, and then I go home.
Go home at night.
So part of that first year is helping navigate that.
Even the social settings and
the social settings, the water cooler talk, so to speak, 90-day reviews. They're very different in the corporate world than the military. Military, you have this matrix and everything's very black and white. In the private sector, everything is not as black and white. There's so much subjectivity that's confusing. And there are bad bosses. But one of the great things Jocko says is, you have a bad boss, so what? Work harder. If you've been in the military, you had a bad boss at some point. You didn't just quit because you didn't have the option. Now you're in the private sector, you have the option, don't take it.
Yes, don't take the easy out.
Yeah, just because the door's open and it seems easy, don't take it. Push through it, you're strong, you're a warrior. Don't forget that. Don't ever forget you're a warrior, even in the private sector.
And so you can come along with the veteran who may be comfortable in the job setting, but maybe socially or in some other way struggling, and Echelon Front Legion is going to come along, instruct them through that, mentor them through that to make sure that over the long trajectory, as you talked about, I saw, where you're talking about, hey, I could see the long-term approach that I was taking was going to work out, and that's the approach that EF Legion is taking too with these veterans.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I used to tell women a lot when I would mentor them is, we always want to know what the guys talk about, in their private settings. Well, go find a male mentor. If you want to talk about, the good old boy club, I say, hey,
go break into it.
Go be part of it.
Yeah.
Go invite yourself.
Drinks,
pull up your chair to the table. Most of the time, people who are leaders, they want to share their knowledge, but they also want to know they're investing time in the right places. Very successful people don't make bad investments in time and people and their money. So make sure that they know you're up for the challenge. You're going to work as hard as they are. You're going to participate, and you're going to be in for the long haul. That's the thing. The great thing about veterans is the loyalty and dedication. Younger people are not tending to want to stay in a career for 20 years. They want to shift. Military people, even military spouses, they want to be a part of a team. So if you can lock them in and they can lock themselves in, there's going to be a long-term relationship.
So I was actually thinking about this when I was walking in this morning, and my career field is completely different from what I did in the service. And if you're in the military today, if you're a submariner, if you're a security force guy, if you're a nuclear, biological, chemical guy, if you're a tank commander, and you go to out processing and they start to tell you about looking for an occupation that is similar to yours in the civilian world, a lot of times that's a non-starter for people in the military. Should people in the service look for similar jobs in the career field, or should they be really open to anything that's out there?
I would say both. So look at what the industry is that's equal to you, but also think back to that kid that raised their right hand. What did you want to be? What were all the possibilities that you thought you could be? If you could take your wisdom and experience you have now, some of the nicks you have, and impart that wisdom on the 18-year-old, what would that 18-year-old do? You have that ability. You still... So go for the things you know and look at them, because you have responsibilities, you need to take care of your family, but also realize that you have that ability. You're fresh in a new market. You're just like that fresh college grad, only you have a lot more experience.
Yes.
You have already made most of your life's mistakes by the time you get out of the military. Especially
by
if
the time
you've
you're
spent
22,
a career.
you've
made a lot of
bit.
mistakes. So what would, basically, what do you want to do when you grow up? And then let's look at not just your job in the military, because if you were in the military for more than 2 years, you had a lot of ancillary jobs. So what else did you do? Oh yeah, well I was also, I had to do MWR stuff. Oh, well that's great. That's a lot of careers. Well, I had to do XYZ. We had a lot of jobs that were not our MOS. Let's look at those. Did you enjoy that? Well, I was, a platoon sergeant, and I loved just, spending time with young troops and molding them. Well, if you were an admin guy, that wasn't your job. So let's look at those.
Yeah, it's not what I would tell the audience if you're a veteran is not to look for a one-for-one replication, but look for a career, or if you're in an interview, look for some gray area where your experience maybe doesn't totally translate, but there's some overlap. And if you can go into a career field and you can find some overlap from what you did, again, it's probably going to be apples to oranges, and it may be a little different, but if you can provide, like you said, a foot in the door, or say there's a little bit of overlap here from what I did in the service. It may not be being a submariner, maybe totally different than, running a finance company or something like that. But like you said, there's leadership in there. There's counting the guys that you had every night to make sure there's so many different day-to-day tasks that you may not have realized that you carried out in your role in the military that in some way overlap to what you'll do in the private sector. How have you seen the business community change its approach to hiring and retention of veterans?
So in the last 20 years, we kind of swung all the way from not taking care of veterans post-Vietnam to doing everything for veterans. I think what the corporate world saw was they needed to say we're hiring veterans, and they needed to step up. They didn't necessarily know what that was going to look like, so they did do a lot of hiring. The challenge came in retention, and a lot of that is really on us, not on the corporate world.
It's on us as on the veteran?
In the veteran community, to make sure that we're preparing ourselves and mentoring each other as we get out and we learn lessons, reaching back, just like Jocko's doing, reaching back and telling the other veterans, hey, this is what it's really like, this is what's going on, because we speak the same language. I believe that corporate America wants to do the right thing, but wanting to do the right thing doesn't always tell you how to do it. So that's what I love about Echelon Front and EF Legion is we're here not to supplant what veteran nonprofits are doing or what corporate ERGs are doing. We're here to help out. We're just that extra resource to help corporate America retain the good ones that they do hire, because that will spread. I mean, that's really what builds our infrastructure and our country, essentially. Mm-hmm. Our country's military is strong because our economy is strong. I mean, it's money, and Jocko says that all the time. What we teach corporations as well as veterans coming out is there's a lot of great things about your passion and motivation and all the feel-good stuff, but the reality is passion's not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to make a company money. Motivation is not really going to either. Right. You have to have discipline. Not every day you're going to feel motivated, but you still get up and you do it. The same with companies. Not every day you're going to feel like
it's going to be the best
day.
Yeah,
it's not going to be that, but you have to be motivated and you have to stay with your program.
Well, one of the most altering definitions of discipline came to me after the military, because when I was in the Marine Corps, the definition of discipline was instant obedience to orders. After I got out of the military, the definition of discipline was doing things when you weren't told to. That was a drastic mind shift, because when you were in your car thinking about walking into that college campus, at that point, discipline wasn't your professor coming out, dragging you out of the car, telling you to sit in the class for an hour. It was about you saying, I have to go in there, I have to be ready to show up at work on time, I have to make sure my shirt looks nice. And when I kind of realized that, I kind of understood too why maybe some veterans may not be succeeding after the military, because they are looking for a support group or somebody to provide that discipline that is no longer there.
Right. The thing that I tell veterans is you actually really do have it. You just forget, because your drill sergeant, your platoon leader wasn't there every day. There were times you had to do it. And when you became a leader, where did that come from? So you have it inside you, but like you learned to change that conversation. Mm-hmm. We spend a lot, which is why we spend a year with people, because you're not going to get it right the first time. We're human.
Yeah.
You're going to fall, or you're going to forget, or you're going to be tired or frustrated, and you have a family, you have kids, you have a lot of things happening. So we want to stay side by side. We're not holding your hand. We're not carrying you. We've got the tough love mentality, but we're standing beside you. Even if we're calling cadence, come on, left,
keep going.
Right. Today, left, right. But it takes that year, and then after that year, it is slam dunk. Your career as a veteran is going to go like that. And what happens is then the company sees that, and then we don't have to tell companies to hire veterans. Companies are going to say, where do we find more of this guy?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, he came in, he was shy, he was quiet, he was smart, but he wasn't. And then all of a sudden, so then they're doing it themselves. You have become a brand ambassador for veterans, and that's what we want.
So for a veteran who is in the audience listening, or for somebody who's running a business, they want to get plugged in, how do they find your website? How do we find you on social media? How can we keep up with you?
Absolutely. So eflegion.com is our main website. We are on all the social channels, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We are growing that audience. I would say if you're a veteran or you're a company, go register on that website. Even if you're not looking for a job right now, go register, because that's going to give you access to all of those training tools.
Before we let you go, can you give us a success story of maybe a veteran that you've seen? You don't have to use their name. Obviously, you yourself are a success story, and that's why you're here, because you continue to lead and serve. But as you've been working with Echelon Front, you've actually seen this play out. You've seen the success stories. You've seen veterans who have returned into their communities and continue to lead and to continue to serve. Is there someone maybe that you've been working with, or that you have seen really grow over the last couple years?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we have a young man just still wet behind the ears, came out infantry type, so very regimented, very
gung-ho.
Yeah, gung-ho. But wanted to go into a very creative field in the IT industry. And so a lot of time spent with him has been on those soft skills, kind of take it down a notch, maybe unbutton your very top button, loosen your tie a little bit. And we've actually had other people in the company who've been out of the military for like 20 years go and say, hey, when you have your next happy hour, invite him, just have that casual conversation, get him to lighten up. And over the course of the first couple of weeks, he was very, this is weird, and he would always say, what's my goal? And I would say, to network. Well, what do I talk about? I said, I don't know. T-ball,
anything you want,
Boy Scouts, whatever you're doing. And it was weird for him for the first couple of months, actually. But now when I see him, I would not guess. He is out there. He's a charming young man. He's having conversations. He's getting more involved in his community as well. So that's the amazing thing, is we're community driven if we're in the military. And the sidebar piece of that is he's gotten promoted twice at his company in a year, and he didn't go for those promotions. He was just letting from what was inside shine. And that's what I love. I'm not teaching veterans anything they don't know. I'm bringing out the best in them, because it's there. They just sometimes forget.
Well, thank you for doing that. Thank you for continuing to lead and serve in our community here in Texas. I know that Echelon Front, Legion and Echelon Front is a great organization. I appreciate everything you guys are doing to make sure that veterans after the military are successful, that they're continuing to lead and really be examples throughout their communities in our great state. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for being a great audience. And if you have a chance, please give us a like, a share online, and go check out Echelon Front Legion to get plugged into businesses, job opportunities, and a great veterans community here in the great state of Texas. We'll see you next time.
Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior Podcast.